Hello, my name is Tia Hart, and today I will be diving into the legacy of Nat Turner. Nat Turner was an African American slave who led the largest slave uprising in the history of the United States. I will be discussing his background, ideologies, uprising, and death, then placing them into the context of his legacy. From my research, I have found that one of the most contested aspects of Nat Turner is his legacy. Some people viewed him as a martyr, while others a cowardly killer. Some gave credit to his uprising as the start of the end of slavery, while others saw it as an isolated event that was short lived, easy to squash, and did not impact the institutions of authority. Overall, I will be arguing in favor of acknowledging the social impact of Turner's rebellion, as well as supporting how the context of his position as a slave is important when discussing his actions and legacy. An important part in understanding Turner's legacy is knowing the motive behind his actions. One of the key primary sources I used in this dive was Nat Turner's confession, where he detailed to Thomas R. Gray his life, motive, and the things that occurred during the rebellion. Nathaniel Nat Turner was born October 2nd in the year 1800. He was born to his master Benjamin Turner, and after Benjamin Turner's death and cycling through other masters, Nat was left in the possession of Joseph Travis. From a young age, Turner was seen to be highly intelligent, even having the ability to read and write. His curiosity and observantness drew him to religion, which he found a profound connection spiritually. Turner considered himself a prophet, as he had spiritual divinations, and he was encouraged in this idea by his family and friends. He devoted himself to fasting and prayer, which led him to begin hearing a spirit, which he said was the spirit that spoke to the prophets in former days. This is most likely in reference to biblical figures such as Moses, who delivered the Hebrew slaves out of Egypt and to the promised land towards freedom. Religion was a critical motive and what led Turner to rebellion, if not the main reason, which is a juxtaposition to the original reason why enslaved Africans were forced to convert to Christianity. At the time, the Bible was used as a method to justify slavery and keep those enslaved subservient. However, Turner's strong spiritual connection and added intellect in reading and writing allowed him to see through the hypocrisy of the type of Christianity that told him to be bound to someone else. In K. Lemplay's theological account of Nat Turner, Christianity, Violence, Theology, Lemplay concluded that Turner's parents had a profound rejection of slavery as his father escaped it and eventually immigrated to Liberia, and his mother expressed his desire to not have Turner live as a slave. This rejection most likely was transferred into Turner's heart at a young age. The belief they had in Turner supports the notion that his ideas were not as isolated as others would claim. He had support way in advance of his rebellion, and as other slaves listened to Turner preach, they too could begin to recognize the hypocrisy of the type of Christianity that told them to be obedient. An eclipse occurred on February 12th, 1831, and Turner took this as a sign from God to begin the preparation for the onset of rebellion. A second astral sign from God on August 13th, 1831, was his sign to commence his plan. I imagine that with his religious conviction, Turner was taking inspiration from Leviticus 24:19 through 21. If anyone injures his neighbor, or as he has done, it shall be done to him, fracture for fracture, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Whatever injury he has given a person shall be given to him. Whoever kills an animal shall make it good, and whoever kills a person shall be put to death. On August 22nd, 1831, the revolt began. Many critics of Turner said he was indiscriminate and merciless in his kills, which is true, and he admitted that in his confession. 55 people were killed, and the majority of those killed were women and children, with at least one of them being an infant. He would later say in his confession that a general destruction of property and search for money and ammunition always succeeded the murders. This is where an element of horror emerges in Turner's story, outside the general horrors of slavery. Throughout this course, it has been very apparent that horror as a medium is often used to make a commentary about the issues within society. Turner brought on that horror to make a statement about the horrific and destructive nature of slavery. Many could claim that slavery was justified or even that slaves enjoyed their capture, but allowing this issue to fester only causes more pain and rage until everything breaks down. Although it had to unfortunately end in the bloodshed of young innocent lives, Turner wanted to bring forth the breakdown of the system of slavery, and that was causing millions more Black people to suffer and die in bondage. On August 23rd, 1831, the rebellion had ended as two groups of armed white men dispersed the group of up to 60 revolters, causing Turner to flee into hiding. He was hiding for 2 months until he was caught on October 30th, 1831, and by a white farmer. He was sentenced to death by hanging and died on November 5th, 1831. When looking into specifically the legacy that came after Nat Turner and his death, I found in my research an interesting pattern of how the event was described, depending on who was talking about it. For example, some would say it was Nat Turner's rebellion, while others would say it was Nat Turner's massacre. And if we look at the Oxford definition of rebellion and massacre, we can get some more insight into how people were viewing him just by based off of the terms that they were used associating in this event. And a rebellion is an organized armed resistance to an established ruler or government, an uprising, a revolt. The people that sided with Turner were the ones most likely to use this term in saying Turner's rebellion. They knew that he was trying to go against the institution of slavery that was keeping them oppressed. And they knew that even though he was creating an onset of a lot of bloodshed in his actions, he had a basis for it. And those that use the term massacre, they view it as the indiscriminate and brutal slaughter of people. People that use only see the massacre in Turner's actions do not understand the additional motive maybe in why he had to take those course of actions. He knew that simply speaking out about slavery was not going to get the action and change that was required. He barely even had a place to be able to speak up about those issues. So direct and forceful action was unfortunately the necessary course that was needed in order to break down the system of slavery. Some people also during this time viewed viewed his actions as an isolated event. It was small because it only consisted up to most 60 revolters, and they tried to downplay its impact. However, we can say that it did truly have a great impact. For example, the laws began to change in a lot of southern states such as Virginia, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Alabama. And these laws began to restrict the movement of slaves, their ability to assemble, kicking free Black people out, and preventing the education of slaves in reading and writing in the majority of states across the country. This is a direct response to the fear that Nat Turner instilled into them. But beyond the fear, they were able to also begin those discussions about the stability of slavery, of how this institution is going to crumble, and how this may be one event now, but it can grow to be much bigger later. And this is also continued in his legacy of just how he died. In Adam Thomas's The Many Deaths of Nat Turner contested historical memory under slavery and segregation, people even are arguing about how he died. And these arguments about how he died further prove his impact on how people want to remember him. For example, the official records say that he was lynched in Jerusalem, South Carolina. But many Black people have accounts saying that he was lynched by a mob of angry white civilians, not just by officials and not just by officials. And one of the people that Thomas's quotes is from Percy Claude, an African American farmer who lived in Southampton, North Carolina for 70 years. And Southampton was the area of the rebellion. Claude was able to get this information from his mother, and his mother got it from her mother. The varying accounts of how Turner died prove how significant his impact as an insurrectionist really was. The side that claimed that he died through the lynching of a through the official lynching process can insinuate that they were trying to push a narrative where his rebellion was small and weak. The authority of the high power authority was in control. There is no imbalance, and this is one-off event that is just from an outburst of anger, but they were able to take it down. On the other hand, the accounts of Black people that were there at the time that say that it was a mob of white civilians shows a different narrative where there is imbalance, where people are showing fear in potentially more insurrections like this, the foundations of which they claim that slavery was steady and stable are crumbling down, which is one of the key things that Turner wanted overall. And additional perspectives on Turner's actions could be seen by varying people, Black and white. Frederick Douglass thinks of Turner as a general, as a leader, and he recognizes that if there is no struggle, if there is no direct attack, there will be no progress. And an abolitionist, William Lloyd Garrison, he does not completely agree with the actual rebellion itself in its violence, but he understands where it's coming from and how it is ultimately needed in order to free the oppressed Black people of the nation. But then, of course, we can look at people like Thomas R. Gray, the man that actually wrote down and transcribed Turner's confession. He sees Turner nothing more as a merciless killer, a murderer, a savage. And he cannot understand how someone can show such lack of humanity and be so merciless and unkind, which I feel is very ironic in the circumstance of what is actually the issue at hand. Gray is obviously refusing to see the actual mercilessness and inhumane nature of slavery and how there was millions more African women, children, and men that had to die in the process of becoming slaves. Ultimately, Turner can very much be viewed in a light claimed by both sides of the argument. A legacy is not always concise and straightforward. It could be complex with praised highlights and detested pitfalls. The good and the bad should be placed into any discussion surrounding a person's legacy, but the most important facet should be context. No matter how someone views him, it has to be acknowledged that his fight had cause and effect. He was justifiably tired of the systematic oppression that took away the bodily autonomy of Black people. People can say that his fight was limited, but it had an impact because it made people stop and think. These discussions were shrouded in fear, but that did give people the motive to think deeper about the institutions of slavery. It is clear that Turner always had freedom for his people on his mind, and at the very least, any further discussion of Turner's legacy should never forgo the key aspect that he was an enslaved man and he wanted freedom for his people.